the global news update on top accolade news. The headlines. Supreme Court allows Trump to end deportation protection for over 350,000 Venezuelans. Protests erupt outside New Zealand Parliament. IMF launches new review of $15.5 billion Ukraine program. Taiwan president reaffirms commitment to peace. We start with the focus in politics. Supreme Court allows Trump to end deportation protection for over 350,000 Venezuelans. The U.S. Supreme Court has allowed the Trump administration to end temporary protected status for nearly 350,000 Venezuelans, stripping them of deportation protections and work permits as a legal appeal plays out. The court unsigned emergency order grants a request from Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, overriding a lower court ruling that had halted the policy reversal. Critics, including Democratic lawmakers and immigration advocates, argue that this decision will force thousands back into danger. The move followed Trump's broader push to escalate deportations and revoke protections granted under President Biden. Still in politics, protests erupt outside New Zealand Parliament. New Zealand's government has postponed a vote on the temporary suspension of 3 Indigenous lawmakers who performed a haka in Parliament during a heated debate last year. The parliamentarians were recommended for suspension after performing the traditional Maori dance ahead of the controversial vote on a bill revising the historic 1840 Treaty of Waitangi. The move, deemed an act of protest, caused a temporary suspension of parliamentary proceedings, sparking criticism from the opposition. The suspension vote will now be held after the upcoming federal budget. Despite protests outside the parliament, opposition leaders argue that the proposed suspensions are excessive and calls for a lesser severe sanctions, such as a censure. Turning to economy, IMF launches new review of $15.5 billion Ukraine program. An International Monetary Fund mission has begun its 8th review of Ukraine's $15.5 billion loan program, launching French talks with Kyiv on stabilizing the war-battered economy and addressing future budget needs. The central bank governor called the IMF partnership a key pillar of resilience as discussion centers on debt sustainability, budget financing, and reforms to strengthen Ukraine's financial sector. With a $38 billion deficit this year and much of the domestic budget directed to defense, Ukraine remains heavily reliant on Western aid for social and humanitarian spending. While funding from 2025 is secured, concerns loom over support for 2026. Moving to international relations, Taiwan president reaffirms commitment to peace. Marking 1 year in office, Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te reaffirmed his commitment to peace and dialogue with China while emphasizing the need to bolster Taiwan's defenses amid escalating tensions. Speaking on Tuesday, he said peace is priceless, but warned against having illusions about Beijing's intentions, citing recent Chinese military drills around the island. Lai reiterated that Taiwan welcomes cooperation with China based on mutual respect and dignity, rejecting China's sovereignty claims. He also addressed economic plans, announcing a sovereign wealth fund to drive Taiwan's tech growth and confirmed ongoing trade discussions with the U.S. Meanwhile, Taiwan's defense ministry reported renewed Chinese military activity near the island. You're watching the Global News Update on Top Accolade News. Do stay with us. Still to come. Thanks for staying with us. In conflict, Trump announces immediate Ukraine-Russia peace talks. President Donald Trump announced that Russia and Ukraine will immediately begin ceasefire negotiations following a 2-hour call with President Vladimir Putin. However, the Kremlin signaled a slower approach with no set timeline and continued military operations. While Trump briefed European leaders and Ukraine's President Zelensky on the plan, he stopped short of imposing new sanctions on Moscow, drawing criticism for appearing too lenient. Trump hinted at future trade prospects with Russia, while Zelensky pushed for broader multilateral talks, potentially hosted by the Vatican or Turkey. Despite Trump's optimism, European leaders pledged tighter sanctions, with analysts warning that the move could embolden Putin without reconcessions. Still in conflict, UK, Canada, France warn Israel of sanctions. Britain, Canada, and France have issued a sharp warning to Israel, threatening concrete action, including possible sanctions, if it does not halt its renewed military offensive in Gaza and ease restriction on humanitarian aid. In a joint statement on Monday, the three allies condemned what they call a disproportionate escalation by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government, describing the resumed flow of aid into Gaza as wholly inadequate. Netanyahu, in response, accused the countries of rewarding terrorism and vowed Israel would press on until total victory is achieved. The warning comes amid international concerns over rising Palestinian death toll, now exceeding 53,000, and continued Israeli military action following Hamas's October 7th attack. In entertainment, Drake urges pardon for Tory lands. Rapper Drake is calling on California Governor Gavin Newsom to pardon fellow Canadian artist Tory Lanez, who is recovering after being stabbed 14 times in a California prison. Lanez served a 10-year sentence for shooting rapper Megan Thee Stallion in 2020, suffered collapsed lung and multiple stab wounds during last week's attack by a convicted murderer. In an Instagram post linking a Change.org petition now nearing 270,000 signatures, Drake wrote, "Come home soon." The petition questions the conviction and seeks clemency, but Governor Newsom has not responded. Lanez remains hospitalized, but is reportedly in stable condition and in good spirits. Now in sports, Thunder's Jalen Williams penalized for press conference attire. Oklahoma City Thunder star Jalen Williams has been fined $25,000 by the NBA for wearing a shirt with profane language to a post-game press conference following Sunday's Game 7 win over Denver Nuggets. The shirt drew the league's penalty despite Williams not using profanity during his remarks. The 24-year-old forward has been instrumental in OKC's playoff surge, averaging nearly 20 points per game. That concludes our global news update for today. Stay tuned for more global news and development. Thanks for joining us. I am Ojorume Okocha. Connect and engage with us on all our social media handles. Do have a wonderful day.